And welcome to the Daily Space Weather and the Smash News Network least busted name in news. Let's get to it. Exciting stuff going on. More M-class flares have been captured. Here's the sun and ionized helium. There is a coronal mass ejection headed Earth's way, expected to arrive right around Christmas Eve. So we've got actually two M-class flares in this video, I think. Here's the most recent one, occurring behind the limb on a new active rising region. So we may see the sunspot number rise even higher here. Here's the colorized magnetogram. We were up to 9 different sunspot groups at a moment. We'll break that down eventually here later in the video. So again, 2 M-class flares showing up here. This is one of the best composite wavelengths you could use, 131 and 94 angstroms. Here's the most recent one. And the radio flux has come back up to 123. So there's the 10.7 centimeter radio flux. Yeah, the upper chromosphere and lower corona emit radio frequency. And that radio flux density is proportional to the sunspot number. So if you look at this black line here, you can see how similar that is in its peaks and valleys to the red line below it. That's the sunspot number. Sunspot number now approaching 120. So to put that in context, if that sort of activity remains for the next, 2-3 weeks, we'll get a smooth monthly value of over 100. And I just put up solar cycles 19 through 25. Since we saw a modern maximum of over 300 sunspots back then in 1957? 1958? 1957 we saw a monthly value of 359 sunspots. Anyway, just to scroll up here on the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard to show you the Enlil spiral. Again, we're expecting a coronal mass ejection strike here actually on the 23rd. So late in the day on the 23rd before Christmas Eve, expecting that M-class flare associated coronal mass ejection to arrive. So it's showing up there on the model. And we do have an ongoing coronal hole wind stream situation at the moment. Also, the solstice happens today, so make sure you join us for our solstice stream. More details on that later in the video. So we could have continued periods of geomagnetic unrest here over the next couple of days. You can see various 4s there on the KP breakdown forecast. Current solar wind conditions quite elevated. We also saw a large quake here off of the coast of Oregon, or off the coast of Eureka. Yeah, that was a 6.2 magnitude quake there. Could have been theoretically felt as far south as San Francisco, Napa Valley, and so on. A 6.2 magnitude quake, the largest on the planet, occurred yesterday off the coast of California. So that happened at 10:18 Universal Time yesterday morning. And just continuing up the list here, keep in mind, folks, any earthquake could be a foreshock. Don't assume that the shaking is done. I didn't hear anything about any tsunamis generated by that earthquake. There were some other 5 magnitude quakes that occurred. And let's look at volcanoes. A brief check on volcanoes showing Sakurajima erupting. Flight level 070. It's a 7,000-foot volcanic ash plume over Kyushu, Japan. Suminosejima also erupting there, flight level 060, 6,000-foot ash plume. And an uptick at the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hai Apai. Yeah, Ha'apai. Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai has produced a 20 to 25,000 foot plume of volcanic ash. So there's an uptick at Tonga. Fuego also exploding. 15,000 foot ash plume over Guatemala from Fuego. Not sure if Nevado del Ruiz is erupting or not. Please don't pole vault the caldera. Volcanic ash not spotted in image there. It's probably cloudy. At Colombia, Sabancaya intermittent puff emissions over Peru. Nevados de Chilean sporadic emissions of water vapor over central Chile. That's Nevados de Chilean. Please visit the links below the video and support the channel via our merch. Don't pole vault the caldera. If you're going through hell, keep going. That's a quote from Winston Churchill. Today's featured product is the Mensa products. Yeah, make Earth not suck again. Now, this channel is utterly apolitical, as we are critical of anybody who screws up. We would like to see a new society generated, one that is a meritocracy, and one in which there is accountability. Anyway, do your part to make Earth not suck again. Perhaps by supporting the channel by picking up merch, telling your friends and foes about the channel. Press share, press like. If you're new to the channel, press subscribe. Lots of content on here besides daily space weather videos. Again, it's completely apolitical. Mensa, make Earth not suck again. It's up to you. Not giant heaving bureaucracies that can't even get out of their own way or do their own jobs effectively. Mensa, make Earth not suck again. Another way to make Earth not suck again would be to support the Smash team. At smashomash.com/Smash team, we're putting up free publicly visible posts throughout the rest of the year. So check that out. Also, if you haven't seen the video entitled M-Class Solar Flare SDO Multiple Wavelengths Slow Motion, make sure you check out that video. Again, various free publicly visible posts available without even logging in at smashomash.com/Smash team. We've replaced Patreon with something superior. So support the channel that way if you want to see the content continue. And welcome to the Neo Renaissance. You can find links to all that stuff below the video and on the homepage at smashomash.com. Congratulations on realizing we exist. Next, some magnetic data. And we're seeing some pretty low readings here. Whoops. We're seeing some pretty low readings here. And that's an indication that the coronal hole wind stream is going to continue here. There is a lot of plasma in between the sun and the earth, and it's traveling at high speeds. Here's the current sheet. There is a North Pole current sheet headed Earth's way. You can see that in green there. Earth is currently in a South Pole current sheet shown in red. The plasma coming out of the solar wind is oriented to one of the solar polar fields. And the current sheet that the Earth is currently in is a South Pole oriented current sheet. Here's another view of it from the line of sight perspective, also showing you the solar magnetogram there. Lots of activity, especially in the southern hemisphere. Next, the line of sight coronal hole plot, and you can see the progression here of the solar polar field reversal cycle in cycle 25. We've got trans-equatorial coronal holes of both north and south pole orientation. And that's good news. We've been forecasting a massive uptick here in coronal holes, and here we have it. You can expect to see continued upticks in coronal hole activity, a very important feature of the solar cycles. Coronal holes weren't even known about until about the mid-90s, when spacecraft started looking at very specific bands of the ultraviolet spectrum, such as this band here, 193 angstroms, is great at showing coronal holes. And again, here is the last few days, and this is the last 24 hours. Next are detected sunspot groups and flare probability. The likelihood of additional solar flares is indeed high. Expect to see additional M-class, possibly even X-class flares. Again, we saw one emanate from behind the limb back here. So another active region likely rising there. That's probably a sunspot. Again, that was an M-class flare, so likelihood of continued large flares is still certainly there. Expect radio blackouts, expect large flares, expect more content coming from the channel. And again, don't forget to view our live stream for the solstice. It's at 10:59 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, yes, autumn ends. What are you going to do with your last hours of autumn? Thanks for tuning into the video during those. Or if you viewed in syndication, congratulations on realizing the channel exists. So there you can see there was another M-class flare. It was a pretty minor M-class flare. Peak flux was around 750 this morning. No relativistic particles here yet from that. And we could see some, although none yet. It did cause some radio blackout here over the southern Indian Ocean. And again, expect to see continued attenuation of the ionosphere as a result of continued solar flaring. Next, the real-time solar wind, and we're seeing some likely errors here, as these don't usually fluctuate quite that much. Looking like a better signal here toward the end. Showing a sudden, very large dip in the density there. That's likely an error, folks. Current solar wind speed showing up here above 600 kilometers per second. As the high-speed coronal hole stream continues. We did see a brief period of geomagnetic unrest that was associated with a bit of a shift here. It was mainly the shift in the BZ here. We saw a brief period of strong BZ there just after midnight. That's what generated that geomagnetic unrest period. The geospace magnetosphere movies are broken. I'm not sure if it's because of the electron flux, but we're seeing old data, 3-day-old data here on the geospace magnetosphere movies, so we can't show you any of that, except that there is none there. Next, a diagram of the solar system. We're going to show you the 7-day forecast, as we do on the regs on the daily space weather videos. And there's where things will be in 7 days. It's like clockwork, folks. It's like clockwork. Next, a diagram of the sky above my head. Is the sun just rising, or is that Mars? I think it's Mars. It's a little too early for sunrise here in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. And by the way, the sun will be near the galactic center today at the time of the solstice. This imagery here from in-the-sky.org is showing you the ecliptic plane in yellow. That yellow line there is the ecliptic plane. The path the sun takes across the sky, the blue line, is the galactic plane. And let's continue on to look at yesterday's coronal mass ejections. Or coronal mass ejection, I should say. It was only one. Here's the view from the LASCO C2 and C3. So these are located at Lagrange point 1, right here, about 1 million miles toward the sun, between the Earth and sun, at that gravitational equilibrium point, Lagrange point 1. So some of this ejecta likely to hit Earth. Solar Ham reporting on its Twitter account that it expects most of this ejecta to miss. Now keep in mind, folks, calculating the speed and trajectory of coronal mass ejections is not the channel's specialty. Our specialty is forecasting coronal mass ejections before they occur. And our record is fairly exemplary, to say the least. We only missed one in the past year, and there were 0 false alarms. And the only reason we missed one is because we shut off our alert. So anyway, that's the coronal mass ejection that we're talking about striking here late in the day on the 23rd. At least that's NOAA's forecast. And we are working on systems to calculate trajectory and speed of these. That's coming later. Currently, we're pretty satisfied in being able to forecast them before they occur. Next, the astronomy picture of the day. It's a superimposition here. The sun superimposed on the galactic plane. You won't be able to see this, as it'll be like 11 a.m. at least here in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. The ecliptic is the time that the sun reaches its maximum southern declination of negative 23.5 degrees. That's at 15:59 Universal Time, or 10:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find that, if you like, at apod.nasa.gov. Today's cosmology segment will have to be postponed to a later time. Make sure you check our playlists if you haven't at youtube.com/smashamash/playlists for hundreds more cosmology segments, often integrated into the daily space weather videos. Incentive to watch the content. Thanks to everybody who does. Next, we're looking at charging hazards, and we're talking about charging of geosynchronous equatorial satellites. And we do see some minor charging hazards here, surface ones, around places like Mexico, moving into the Central Pacific Ocean. Here's the electron flux over the past year, reported by Solon.info. If you want to look up that chart yourself, Solon.info. That's a one-year chart of the greater than 2 mega electron volt electron flux. And we could get into electron warning levels here, and we got some serious chaos happening also in the total electron content forecast. We'll get to that in a minute. This is the 3-day chart. And here's the forecast model. You can see we're expecting an uptick here in the electron flux. This could cause some significant communications breakdowns, as we're already seeing massive GPS errors. So next we're going to show you the total electron content forecast, which is basically this zone right here, the area between your GPS handset and your GPS satellite. GPS satellites are located at about 12,500 miles of altitude, and they have to communicate through a lot of electrons, especially around the equator at noon. And check out the massive GPS errors likely here over North America, the Southern Ocean, parts of Antarctica. Huge GPS errors over the Western Pacific. I'll let it play through a second time here before we show you the ionosphere, which is also showing some significant anomalies. So there you see huge chaos happening once again in the electron flux, the total electron content forecast. Next, the F ionosphere layer, located at about 300 kilometers of altitude. Here's the ionogram showing vibrational frequency and giving us insight into what's going on at the bridge between Earth and space. Quite anomalous here. We're seeing some high-frequency anomalies at nighttime and some low-frequency anomalies in the daytime. Here's the anomalygram showing anomaly in megahertz from the 30-day median. Lots of high-frequency anomalies there at that moment. Mostly high-frequency anomalies. And then some wild swings. Places like the Indian Ocean. And we'll bring up the latest image here once that plays through. And there's the latest image. That's 10:30 Universal Time ionogram, 10:30 Universal Time anomalygram. Once again, anomalies occurring in the Drake Passage. We've made note of this for the past couple of days. And let's do bonus features. Bonus feature number 1 is the ground-based solar observatory at Cerro Tololo, Chile, to see lots of filaments. Coronal mass ejection warning and solar flare warning, both in place. Most likely spot right around this area. Again, we just saw an M-class flare happen back here behind the limb, so there's another active region rising. And we're well over 100 sunspots. So here's what we're talking about. We captured this on the GOES 16 SUVI. Just some spectacular imagery there. You can see that M-class flare from that new active region. And let's see what we can see on the solar intensitygram. So we'll press refresh there, and also on the colorized magnetogram. There we go. We'll do a little tour. We've got a sunspot up there that's capable of producing large flares. These are all capable of producing large flares. It's enough to have a coronal mass ejection and solar flare warning, both in place. And do we see any umbrae rising down there yet? Not yet. As far as these areas, that's beta class. That's capable of producing large flares. That one not so much. This one up here, not quite as magnetically complex. Lots of activity though. And we'll show the fields close up in high res. Quite an active star all of a sudden. And we apologize to all of you who the sudden uptick in activity, it doesn't fit your narrative. Sorry about that. I don't think the sun really cares. And shout out to the sun for producing more solar flares while we record videos. So yesterday, once again today, a solar flare happening right at quite an opportune time. So we'll end the video here with some more close-ups and some zoom outs. Here's 171 angstroms. The previous was 193. And we'll close out in my favorite wavelength here. If you've got comments to leave directly for the sun, leave them in our comments thread. The sun does read all of our comments. It just chooses not to leave comments itself for whatever reason. Once again, congratulations on realizing the channel exists, and may that solar wind be at your back. Opinions expressed in this video, not necessarily the opinions of Smash News Network, least busted. Name and news.